up our culture. This, I mean, talking about grammar is one of those things. But in, what's this? Okay. And so tonight, tonight, what we'll be talking about. Can you guys see? Can you guys see the board? Okay, good. So tonight, what we'll be talking about is verbs, and more specifically, simple. I have them written over here. Simple present tense verbs, or simple present tense, excuse me, and present continuous tense. I understand that's a little confusing, but it'll all make sense in the next half hour or so. So, to begin with, a verb is simply a word that is describing an action. So, simply put, that means that this is any word where you're doing something. So so that's what we mean when we say a word that is describing an action, like you're doing something. So, as an example, looking at a blank screen. So here are some examples of this, or of these of verbs. We have walk, run, stroll, which is similar to walk, throw, live, read, write, type, listen, and learn. Now, some of these words maybe aren't quite verbs so much. They're not necessarily describing an action, or at the very least, they're not describing an action that is physically happening. It might be something that's happening in another sense of that, of what a verb is. So, but in all these words, or most of these words, for the most part, are describing something that you would be doing. So, for example, I'm going to take the word. I'm just going to go ahead and take the words walk and throw. And as a little example, as a actual example, I walk. We all get that? I walk. That's me. Me walking, or the word walk, and what I just did. That's the verb. The word walk is the verb. And then let's do that. The other word throw. I throw something. It doesn't matter what it is. I just throw something. The word throw is the verb in that sense. Okay. So, and moving right along, these other words such as write, type, write and type are two ways of doing the same thing that are different physical modes of doing it. But they're both verbs because the word write, you are writing something, or you're typing something. You're on a computer and you type away. Oh. Whatever it is you type. Oh. Hello. We are moving right along with our lecture here, or our mentoring session lecture of what verbs are. So okay. Okay. Anyway, are we all good? Okay. So in any event, as I was saying, write and type are words are verbs that are writing, or excuse me, not writing, that are describing a similar mode, and learn, which is what all you guys are doing here tonight. You're learning, or you're here to learn. So you are also doing a more mental way to use the word a verb. All right. So we now get into, as I was saying before, where things get a little complicated, but will make sense, is a simple present tense. So as we are looking up at the board, I have the sentence here, or yeah, the sentence here, they walk home. And in this context, in this sentence, the word walk, as I said over here with the examples, and as I showed some of you earlier just now, this word right here, walk, is the verb being used, and it's in a simple, it's in its simplest form. So when you write a sentence where you're saying they walk home, this form of the word walk is currently in it's talking about the present tense. So we're talking in the now, and it's in its simplest form. There is nothing attached to it, so there's no suffix attached here, and there's no prefix. Well, there can't be any prefix with walk, but there is no prefix on the word walk. And moving right along, we have the sentence, you run across a field. So yet again, the word run, like walk, it's in its simplest form, and I'm using it in this case to describe something I'm doing in the present. And by that, and it's only the one word run. There's no suffix or prefix yet again. And then as I showed earlier, with this last example, I have the sentence here that says, I throw a ball. So as I was showing you earlier where just now, where I throw something, could be anything, could be a ball, pencil, my soda bottle, I don't know. Here, in this case, I'm throwing a ball, or I throw a ball. So I haven't done anything to it, and all I've done is just simply say I throw a ball. So that's what simple present tense words are. And now we get slightly more confusing, but again, this will help to make sense of what I just spoke about. So this is present continuous tense. So by that, these words are all talking we're still talking in the present tense. What is different now is that I have added INGs to each of these words. So with the similar sentence, they walk home, this sentence here reads, they are walking home. And the continuous part of the sentence is the are walking, to denote that all I'm doing is and I'm going to do an example here, turn this computer around. I am continuously walking. So we move to the door and we walk away from the door. So I am continuously walking, whereas the first example, the present tense, it's just walk. So it's simply as if I took a step and stopped. With continuous tense, what I'm doing is I'm walking. I am continually walking. And I probably will look like a crazy maniac as I walk around the room doing this. And then we could be running. So I'm going to do a jog. And that is actually our next example. We are running across a field. As a matter of fact, there's a field right outside this building that I could run across with this computer while you guys watch. You guys would be really entertained. So that's describing for continuous tense. That's what running. That would be a difference between running and walking, or how to use those two words. That would be the difference. Oh, what's going on? Hello.
Hello.
I will backtrack if you. I will slightly backtrack if you want to go back to the beginning, but for now, and moving. So continuing where we were within the present continuous tense. This last sentence that I have written up here is, you are writing a sentence, and so
Geus ditutupan. Jeung pan emean itu di komunikasi lagi luar negeri.
So,
So,
if words are writing is where the continuous tense is.
Bu Mega ya Pak Yuki. Pak Yuki teh anu biru. Iya.
Okay. And so for present continuous tense, if you are writing something, so as I said, all the way back here, we have the word write, which is similar to, in its simplest form, is similar to walk, run, and throw for the present tense.
I just need to check that the projector's off, which it is because of the red light.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I am sorry about that. I got interrupted by someone else. So we're saying, where was I? Yes. So the word writing is the continuous form of the word write over there. So, does anyone? Okay, so I understand that was a very so that's a very that's a very quick and dirty intro. Well, not dirty, but it's a very quick intro into how we use verbs. And anybody have any questions on verbs? And that could be anything. Anybody have any questions at all? I mean, that's what I had. So this is all I had in terms of lecturing to you guys about what a verb is, and at least simple present tense and present continuous tense. But is there anything that you got? Is there anything anybody doesn't understand that they want to ask when it comes to verbs, at the very least? And these and you can ask questions about anything. They don't have to be about verbs either. So, anything?
Okay. Anybody question? Everybody? Maybe Jacob. How much tenses we know?
May you repeat that? May you repeat the question? So how much?
How much we know for tenses? Because tenses there are 16 or how much? And
I not quite sure, but I mean, yeah, I don't quite know, or I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Anything else, or any? Yeah. Any, or maybe not questions about verbs, but anything about anything about how you might use one of these words or one of these a verb, or maybe not a verb so much, but how you might try to use a sentence or not a sentence, but like and not how to use a verb by itself, but how you, any questions about how you might use a verb when here in the state, or you know what? Any general questions at all?
okay. Anybody else? For question? Pak Yuki? Pak Yanwar?
Anyone?
Yeah. Bu Aulia, Pak Rahmat.
Doesn't have to be about verbs, or at the very, it doesn't have to be about verbs. It can be, the question can be about anything. If you want to ask a question about that has to do with verbs and something else, and how verbs are used in American culture, I suppose you can ask, but the questions don't have to be limited to don't have to be limited to the to what I talked about just now. Anyone afraid of using verbs, I suppose? Anybody afraid of actually trying to use one of these words in because I know because trying to understand how to use one of these words can it can be simple, but at the same time it can be very, very hard to understand when to actually use it, or at the very least when to use it correctly. Sometimes, as I find, I've been living here in the U.S. my whole life, but I still find times where I'm saying a word and I meant to say it a different way. Like I use a verb, and for me, I may have used it incorrectly, or I might have mistakenly used it, but I still use it all the same. And sometimes the further along you go, it can sometimes be very, very difficult to know when you want to use a verb in a certain tense, for example, because you might use a verb in one tense, and then every other word related, or every other word in that sentence you have to change, and so sometimes I find that very, very hard to deal with, because you could be talking in one tense, like I could be saying something in the past tense, like I could be referring to something that happened already, and I change one word and then the whole sentence has to be changed. So that's something I find to be difficult, annoying, downright strange about my own language.
Jerome, what is different present tense between present continuous tense?
So what are some differences between present
tense and between present continuous tense?
Differences. So as I was saying earlier, one difference is that the simple present tense is referring to the word simply the word in its simplest form, but that word by itself. So let's work with the word walk right now. The word walk by itself is simply referring to the act. Like the word walk is a verb because it's referring to the action of walking. Mm-hmm. So if you're to walk, and another way to think about it is between walk and run is how are you getting from one place to another? Do you walk there? Did you run there? But walk and run are referring to it in general and in its simplest form. So you walk from point A to point B. That is a simple present tense way of using walk. Whereas, as I have it up there, present continuous tense, the difference is with continuous, it's talking about it continually happening. So it has the so it's walking. It has the suffix. It has that ending to it, the ing ending to it. And so it's something meaning that it's continually happening. So instead of saying that you walk from here to there, you're saying that you continuously walked, or you were walking or are walking from point A to point B. It's something that is it's still in a way you can think of it as something that's still going on because it is in the present tense. So it's something that's still going on. At least when you're writing or saying it, that is. So those are two. So that's one difference between the two. Another difference would be how you use that, how you use a word based on whether you're continuously, or excuse me, whether it's the continuous tense or the simple present tense. So, or because you use these words differently. So, for example, you might say that you are, or I might say I walk from here, from where I'm standing, to the door that's over there. I might say that, which is okay. Whereas if I made that in the continuous tense, it would be I am walking from here to the door. Same idea. It's just that instead I just changed the tense is all I did. Or I could say, or another way to do it, or another way to look at that is I walk to the door. Continuous tense might be in slightly a different way, or a different example would be I am walking down the stairs. Okay? So there's the stairs, but because there's a lot of stairs, I have to use the word walking because I'm continuously going to be walking down the stairs. Okay? So that's another difference. It's that's another difference. It's based on when you would use it, or when you would use it and how you're going to use it. And I'm going to quickly run over to my backpack to grab a charger for my computer because my computer is going to die soon, and we don't want that because then I can't mentor you guys. So I'll be right back. Where's my charger? This is always want to have a fully charged computer. Okay, please work. Actually, start charging the computer. Okay, we're back. Any other anything else? Any questions about the difference between the two tenses? Like anything you don't understand about the difference between the two, or anything you don't understand about either of those tenses in general, I suppose. Anyone? Anything you don't understand about the simple present tense, or anything you don't understand about the present continuous tense?
I think understand.
Okay. Means I did my job pretty well. Anything about examples of verbs, or anything about the definition of what a verb is that I have here? Anything about that confusing, or people still don't quite understand? And no? Okay.
The question, Pak Yanwar?
Anyone? Any other general questions?
Maybe you can give me pronunciation for word on Blackboard.
Pronunciation of
pronunciation for word.
So is there a specific word you want me to explain the pronunciation of right here?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, okay. So you would okay. So So you would pronounce, so like this word right here that I'm pointing at. I'm gonna move this computer.
Yeah.
You guys see that word that I have my computer looking at where I'm pointing to? So that word there, that would be pronounced read.
Read.
You would pronounce you would pronounce that word. You would excuse me. Put you back here. So you would pronounce that word right here, this word right here,
Yeah.
as read.
Read.
Yeah, read.
Yes, read.
Now, funny enough, a word. It's actually interesting that I picked this one first because this word actually has several pronunciations that are based on how you say it, or not how you say it, when you use it, I should say. So when you use this word, the pronunciation actually changes. So if I'm going to say that, so for example, I would say I read, all right?
Mhm.
I read a book.
Mhm.
Whereas another pronunciation, as I said, the initial pronunciation of that word is read. I might say, I am going to read a book.
Mhm.
Or I am reading the newspaper. The newspaper. Whereas I might say, I read what's up on the board. So you see, so you see how how the pronunciation actually changed when I was using it, because I said I read. So I said I read what's up on the board, whereas I said I am going to read a book. So that's an interesting thing about this word, about the word read, because you can say read or you can say read or read. Like you might. Another example with the pronunciation read is I might say I read aloud. So if you've ever had to stand up in front of a class or in front of other people and read something aloud, you might say I have read aloud this, or I will, or yet again the pronunciation changing, you might say I will read this aloud, because all you're doing there is you're simply changing the words you're putting into the sentence. Okay, so these two words right here, I would pronounce, those would be pronounced as right.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
like, yeah, right. And type.
Type.
Yeah, type. So right.
Right.
Right and type. That's how you would pronounce those two words. And actually, and here's actually a little something to watch out for when it comes to pronunciation. And this actually doesn't have so much to do with pronunciation, so much as it has to do with words looking alike.
Mm.
How do you think you might pronounce that word?
Right.
If you had to take exactly. Right.
Right.
Right. So you
Right.
see,
Right.
yeah. So those two words they are pronounced exactly the same, but they're spelled differently. They're different words. Okay? That's one of the confusing, that's what I was referring to. That's actually one thing I was kind of referring to, or I was kind of trying to make sense of to you guys about the English language. There are words that are pronounced the same, but they look very different. And again, so here's type. And so that's very much like type. I am going to type a paper. I'm going to type a sentence. That's how you would use that, and that's how you pronounce it. And so these last two words here up on the board, these last two, 1 and 2, right here. This one is listen. So listen. That's how you pronounce that one.
Listen.
And this one is very simply learn.
Learn.
That's how you pronounce it as learn. Okay?
Learn.
Excuse me. And so makes sense to then. So this word you pronounce as live.
Live.
Live. So this is live.
Live.
This is throw. Like I was showing, as I was showing before, I throw a ball or I throw something. Above that, you pronounce this as stroll. So stroll. Stroll.
Stroll.
Yeah. Yep. Stroll. It's a little bit of a tough one because there's that TR in the middle there, but you pronounce it as stroll. Then we have very simply run. R-U-N, run. That's a very simple one. And walk. Been saying those two, run and walk, all night long, literally. So these two are very simply pronounced the way you might think to pronounce them: run and walk. So that's how you. So that's. I hope that addresses the question of pronunciation of all these words, and that kind of is the same with other. That's similar to other verbs, in that there are verbs where you might pronounce it one way, or you might pronounce it another way. Like read, the word read is very simply, the word read is a very, very interesting case because it's one of those few words where you pronounce it one way and then you pronounce it another way. But there are, when it comes to verbs, there are other verbs out there where it may be difficult to try, or you might pronounce the word differently because the word is spelled differently and also is being used in different ways. So that's like one thing to look out for when you when you're trying to learn about verbs and all the different ways you can use verbs. Pronunciation, when and how to use it, those are all things you have to be a little careful of, because even somebody like me, I struggle with stuff. Not so much verbs, but there's other grammar techniques that I struggle with, and I've been surrounded by this language my entire life, so you would think I'm used to it. But yeah, so I hope that addresses the pronunciation question. Anything else? Any other questions? Very, very interesting sound. And any other questions? Any at all?
I have question.
Who was that?
Maybe Jacob, you can give me trick or tips for remember grammar.
Ways to remember grammar.
Yeah, tips or
tips. That's gonna. So I certainly will give you tips, which is that when it comes to verbs,
yes,
you use verbs when you want to write a sentence where you want to convey an action. So So simply put, in that sense, if you wanted to write a sentence where you're want to convey to the reader, to the person who's going to read that sentence, that somebody is walking, then you'd want to use the word walk. Then you obviously want to use the word walking, but that kind of applies to all sentences where you're using a verb. You want to use the correct verb for what you want to convey. So an easy way to think about a verb is, what action do you want in the sentence? What action word, what verb do you want in the sentence? So do you want when you're writing a sentence, do you want to say, I walked? Like, do you want to use the word walk? Do you want to use the word run? Because that's very different. Because if someone reads walk versus run or ran, that's going to sound, the sentence will sound very different if it's walk versus if it's run. So when it comes to verbs, it really depends what kind of action you want to convey to your reader, is how I would simply put it. And what also, another thing to keep in mind, another tip about verbs, and you guys might touch, or you'll probably touch on this in the next couple of weeks, is that when it comes to verbs, there's the present tense, like we covered tonight, and then there's the past tense. So the difference, so do you want to be talking in the present tense? Do you want things to sound like they're happening right now, or do you want it to sound like it's happened already? It is another tip. When you're writing a sentence, you want to be thinking about that. Do you want to be talking about it happening, and actually, so you guys can actually see my head. Do you want to be talking about it now, or do you want to be talking about it, or do you want to be talking about it as if it's going on now, or do you want to be talking about it as if it's happening, as if it's already occurred? So that's another tip. And very simply put, it's going to depend. Like, I could stand here and try to give you a million different tips, but that wouldn't be very productive, now would it? Because this is the English. Unfortunately, with the English language, it's kind of always changing. There's new words being added, and so that means the pronunciation changes. But certain things like verbs, they don't really change, or haven't changed very much. And I would simply say it's going to depend on. It's really going to depend on like what words you're using. So verbs, adjectives. Adjectives is another word that's used in grammar, but it will really depend on what you're talking on, what type of words you're talking about. So is it verbs, adjectives? Is it the subject of a sentence? If you go really in depth with grammar, you'll learn all sorts of things that have to do with verbs, subjects, adjectives, all that sort of stuff. But to go back to verbs, those tips I told you are some of the simplest tips I can give. I mean, I could give you many, many more, or I could try to give you many more, but that at a certain point, that may not be very productive. Because sometimes, and with verbs or with the English language, the best thing is to simply immerse yourself in it, or talk to people in English, and test out these verbs, or test out sentences that have these words in them to see how it works. That's what I would say. Those are some of the. So that's what I would say about giving tips on verbs and using them. That is.
Okay. Any question? Everybody?
Any final questions? I mean, the hour. Well, technically speaking, the hour is almost up, but.
Okay. Final question, everybody.
Anyone? I mean,
Yes, Jacob, maybe I think enough for mentoring for today. Thank you, Jacob.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jacob, for okay. See you next week. Goodbye.
Bye.
Sudah, Pak? Sudah? Pak, sudah, Pak? Sudah, Pak? Di cancel aja udah. Ini.
Hentikan. Kan ngobrol